Good morning and welcome to St. Paul's United Methodist Church. I'm Dr. Charles Alcala and I send greetings to you wherever you might be this morning. This is now the fifth Sunday that we gathered in a virtual setting. And like those early Christians, we know that wherever we are, God is with us. So I want to read this morning from Mark's account in the 16th chapter. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James and Salome bought spices so that they might go and anoint him. And very early on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. They had been saying to one another, "Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance to the tomb?" When they looked up, that they saw that the stone had been rolled away. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in white, sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. But he said to them, "Do not be alarmed, for you are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, he who was crucified. He has been raised from the dead. He's not here. Look, there is the place where they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter that he is going ahead of you to Galilee, and there you will see him, just as he told you." So they went out and fled from the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. And all that had been commanded them, they told briefly to those around Peter. And afterward, Jesus himself sent out through them, from east to west, the sacred and imperishable proclamation of eternal salvation. This is how Mark ends his account of the gospel. Now, early manuscript of this book, there's two different endings. The shorter ending that I just read and a longer ending, which I'll go into in a little bit. But this idea that Jesus has been raised from the dead, that, like the creed says, Jesus was crucified, dead, and buried. Now, had nothing else been written, it would have been more than enough. Because what we are seeing here is a community that knows that God is with them in whatever circumstance that they might find themselves. Maybe this story will help. Years ago, almost 100 years ago, in fact, in Kiev, in the Ukraine, there was an event in a large auditorium, and a large crowd was gathered there to hear a speaker from the Communist Party giving a talk on, the superiority of communism as opposed to theology and faith. And the speaker had gone on for some considerable time. Now, what made this talk so serious was more than just the topic, but the fact that around the auditorium there were armed guards, soldiers from the Red Army. And so it was really kind of a captive audience. Well, the speaker got to the end and he was standing, very proud of himself. And does anyone have anything to say? And up from the crowd, there came an older gentleman, and he mounted the steps, came stood next to the speaker and in a clear voice raised his hands and said, "The Lord is risen." And as one, the entire audience rose to their feet and proclaimed, "He is risen indeed." I don't know for certain what the fate of that older gentleman was, but I'm pretty sure in saying that he didn't see the end of that day. That's the importance that this resurrection has. This is a life and death issue. This is an issue that says, this happened. We have witnesses. Do you believe them or not? Are you willing to stake your life on what is written here? We don't know exactly who or when, but there's a longer ending to Mark, and continuing in verse 9. Now after he rose early on the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, from whom he had cast out 7 demons. He went out and told those who had been with him, while they were mourning and weeping. But when they heard that he was alive and had been seen by her, they would not believe it. After this, he appeared in another form to 2 of them, as they were walking into the country. And they went back and told the rest, but they did not believe them. Later, he appeared to the 11 themselves as they were sitting at the table, and he upbraided them for their lack of faith and stubbornness, because they had not believed those who saw him after he had risen. And he said to them, "Go into the world and proclaim the good news to the whole of creation." I don't know if you notice the difference between the shorter ending and the longer ending. The shorter ending has the Sabbath. It has the reaction of the women, the proclamation to the disciples. We know that they told eventually to all the disciples what had happened, and that Jesus told them to go into the world. Now, the shorter ending of Mark it's important because it cuts to the chase. It gets right to the heart of the matter, that these were the witnesses. This is what happened. This is what they saw. This is what they said. The longer ending tells a slightly different story. Again, we hear what the women heard and saw and said, but then we hear three times that the disciples, the 11, heard the message and didn't believe until Jesus himself came and took them to task for the fact that they had been given the gospel. They had been offered testimony. What was it going to take for them to act on that witness? Now, we know, we would not be here this morning talking about this if the 11 had not taken Jesus' instructions and the witness